Has it ever crossed your mind that a mother would intentionally exile her own daughter from a holiday gathering? Not because of some massive falling out, but simply because the daughter's profession wasn't flashy enough to parade in front of company. Just 5 days before Thanksgiving, my mom rang me up with a very clear directive. My sister was bringing her affluent new partner to meet everyone, and I was strictly uninvited. My modest income as a public school teacher would apparently be a stain on her perfect image. I quietly replied, "I get it," and disconnected the call. What my relatives were completely oblivious to, however, was that I was the sole trustee overseeing a massive $15 million fortune, the very same wealth my flawless sister was banking on to fund her lavish lifestyle. So, when they stumbled upon the reality of the situation a few days later and showed up at my apartment in a total panic, the dynamic shifted in a manner nobody could have anticipated. I'm Thora Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and this is my experience. If you happen to be tuning into this video, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from today. The phone rang on a Sunday evening, November 24th, precisely at 6:47 p.m. That timestamp is burned into my memory because I was right in the middle of grading high school history papers focused on the Progressive Era. I had just finished scribbling a glowing note on a student named Marcus Thompson's paper regarding labor rights. The dark poetry of that moment didn't dawn on me until much later. I was sitting there championing a teenager's understanding of workplace dignity, right as my own flesh and blood was preparing to shove me to the absolute bottom of our family's social ladder. "Thora," my mother began. Her tone had that unmistakable concoction of artificial sweetness masking a rigid, icy core, a voice I had been decoding since childhood. "We need to have a conversation about Thursday." I placed my grading pen on the desk. In the Mitchell household, the phrase, "we need to have a conversation," was never a preamble to anything pleasant. "What's going on?" I asked. There was a hesitation on her end. The specific kind of heavy pause that serves as the wrapping paper for an impending insult. "Vivian is bringing Derek over for the holiday to meet everyone. You realize what a big deal this is." Derek Hartwell. I was intimately familiar with the name, having been subjected to it roughly 400 times over the preceding 3 months. He was the chief executive of Hartwell Capital, a private equity firm boasting over $400 million in assets. To my sister, Vivian, he was the golden ticket to the opulent existence she had always been convinced was her birthright. "That's wonderful news," I replied, genuinely meaning it. In spite of our strained history, I truly wished for my sister's joy. "I'm excited to finally meet him." Another silence stretched across the line. This one felt much heavier. "Actually, that's exactly the issue I wanted to address." She cleared her throat. "Vivian feels, well, she is of the opinion that it would be best if you skip Thanksgiving this year." Those syllables dropped into my reality like heavy boulders crashing into a tranquil pond. I could feel the icy ripples echoing through my ribcage, a sensation that was far too familiar. "I'm so sorry, Thora. Don't take it personally. It's just that Derek operates in a very elite sphere. High-level finance, massive investments, that whole ecosystem. And you're..." She paused, pretending to search for the right phrasing, even though we both knew she had it loaded in the chamber. "Your chosen profession." It just might convey the improper image. My chosen profession. She made it sound like I had tripped and fallen into a classroom, completely ignoring the fact that I had battled for my teaching credentials while juggling 2 different side hustles to fund my graduate studies. "Mom, I hold a master's degree in education," I reminded her. "I've been a teacher for a decade." "Exactly," she fired back, her inflection shifting as if my defense had only cemented her argument. "A decade of your life, and you're bringing home what? $50,000. 58. Not that the exact figure held any weight. In her mental accounting book, any salary a teacher made would be permanently deemed insufficient. "Vivian is a marketing director these days," my mother continued. "She deals directly with investors, people with incredibly high net worths. It is crucial that Derek views the Mitchells as a family that fits seamlessly into his reality." My mind instantly flashed back to the previous Thanksgiving, remembering exactly how Patricia Mitchell had introduced me to the wealthy Hendersons from her exclusive reading group. This is my eldest, Thora. She teaches. The silence that followed had been suffocating, drenched in palpable disappointment. Then came the pivot, and Vivian, naturally, works in corporate marketing. The elevation in her pitch, transforming from a dull murmur to a boastful declaration, was calculated to look natural. It never was. I then recalled the email I received from my mother a quarter of a year ago, essentially demanding I bankroll a chunk of my sister's engagement celebration. Seeing as you don't have a family of your own draining your finances, I expect you can pitch in a bit more. $3,000 should handle the floral arrangements and the venue deposit. I had wired the funds that very afternoon, biting my tongue. The National Education Association notes that educators make roughly 26% less than peers with similar collegiate backgrounds. I had that metric memorized. Not out of some bizarre martyr complex, but because it was my job to instruct teenagers on systemic unfairness and how our culture decides which professions deserve financial respect. I simply hadn't anticipated becoming a living exhibit of this phenomenon at my own family's dinner table. "Mom," I started, keeping my voice measured. I could just drop by after dinner, just to say a quick hello and meet Derek. Vivian made her boundaries very clear. My mother's tone crystallized into pure ice. "She does not want you present in any capacity. I'm asking you not to make this harder on me, Thora. Don't make this harder on me." She said it as if I were the person holding the weapon. I scanned my living space. It was a modest, one-bedroom unit in Somerville that had been my sanctuary for half a decade. I looked at the second-hand sofa I had meticulously reupholstered with my own hands. I stared at the towering bookshelves crammed with historical biographies and semester outlines. I glanced at the cramped galley kitchen where I assembled my own meals every single morning at 5:30 because purchasing food at the school cafeteria wasn't in my budget. This beautiful, hard-won existence of mine was the very thing causing them humiliation. "I understand," I murmured. The phrase slipped past my lips on autopilot, a reflex honed over 10 years of constant practice. I understood when they conveniently overlooked my birthday but orchestrated a massive surprise bash for Vivian. I understood when my elevation to head of the history department wasn't even mentioned over family dinner, whereas Vivian scoring a new office dominated the conversation for 20 minutes. I understood when I was deliberately cropped out of the annual holiday greeting card because the photographer had an upcharge for groups larger than 4. "I understand" were the two most expensive words in my emotional vocabulary. "Good," my mother sighed, a wave of relief washing over the speaker. "I knew you would be reasonable. You always are." We ended the call. I placed my cell phone face down on the desk. For an extended period, I just sat there, completely motionless, observing the twilight seeping out of the sky through my window panes. The brilliant essay by Marcus Thompson was still resting under my desk lamp, his passionate sentences regarding human dignity and equitable treatment glowing softly. Eventually, I flipped open my laptop. Sitting right there on the desktop was a digital folder I hadn't dared to touch in several months. Its label was uncomplicated: Grandma Eleanor. Stored inside was a message from Margaret Caldwell, a seasoned attorney, time-stamped November 20th. The subject read, "Regarding annual trust evaluation, Eleanor Mitchell Trust." I had been deliberately sidestepping this email, dreading the complex inquiries it would force upon me and the immense choices it required me to make. I snapped the laptop shut once more. However, for the first instance in a decade, when I crawled under my covers that evening, I didn't shed a single tear. Instead, I experienced a completely foreign sensation. A hollow cavity had formed right where my infinite patience used to reside. And deep within that emptiness, a tiny seed of something fiercely different was starting to grow. The dialogue from that phone conversation replayed in my skull for the entirety of Monday. I was pacing at the front of my classroom during third period, breaking down the catastrophic origins of the Great Depression, but my mother's biting words, "Your chosen profession might convey the improper image," were echoing beneath the surface of every sentence. I was educating these bright teenagers on monumental economic collapse, detailing how hardworking families lost absolutely everything overnight, while my own blood relatives viewed my honest paycheck as an outright disgrace. "Ms. Mitchell." A hand shot up into the air. It was Jasmine Reyes, a junior who was sharp as a tack. "Are you doing okay? You seem kind of somewhere else today." I forced a reassuring grin. "I'm totally fine, Jasmine. Just pondering the strange ways that history tends to repeat itself, often in ways we never expect." Later that evening, I sat down and calculated the genuine stakes of my continued silence. If I bowed my head and accepted this exclusion, if I played the part of the compliant, invisible daughter and stayed home, what would be the next demand? "Easter Sunday? Thora, Derek's parents are flying in. Maybe you should sit this one out." And then Vivian's inevitable marriage ceremony. It's a very small, exclusive event. You understand, right? I was staring down a future where every single holiday, birthday, and family milestone would transpire completely without me. I would become a ghost in my own history. But the financial stakes were incredibly real, too. My mother had long ago established a precedent of extracting my savings whenever it suited her agenda. There was the $3,000 for Vivian's lavish engagement bash. There was the $2,500 loan from the previous year to fix my dad's fishing boat funds that were never repaid and never spoken of again. There was this perpetual, unspoken implication that because I was unmarried and childless, my money was essentially communal property. If I kept my mouth shut, their financial requests would only escalate, and I would continue to pay just to maintain a spot at a table where I wasn't even welcome. Right around 9 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed. A text from my father, Harold. "Sweetheart, I am so sorry about Thanksgiving. Your mother says this is for the best. I love you." I stared at those illuminated words for a long time. Harold Mitchell was a 63-year-old retired accountant and a lifelong bystander to his wife's decisions. He had never once risen to my defense. Not when I was explicitly passed over for opportunities. Not when my professional achievements went unacknowledged. Not when my mother diminished my worth in 100 tiny ways. Yet, he always made sure to say he loved me. As if a declaration of affection entirely void of supportive action meant anything at all. I chose not to respond. Instead, I opened my laptop. The unread email from Margaret Caldwell was waiting in my inbox like a sealed envelope from an alternate life. My grandmother, Eleanor, had passed away 2 years prior at 85. Out of everyone in my family tree, she was the singular soul who authentically saw me. When I walked across the stage to accept my master's degree, she drove 3 hours to attend, whereas my parents simply mailed a card. When I secured my first teaching job, she treated me to dinner and told me she was proud. Once, when I confessed my frustrations about feeling invisible at family gatherings, she reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "Thora, you are not invisible. You are just surrounded by people who have forgotten how to see." I hadn't comprehended the magnitude of what she had done for me until after she was gone. I clicked on Margaret's email. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, as per our annual review, the Eleanor Mitchell Irrevocable Trust currently holds assets valued at $15,247,891.33. As sole trustee, you have full discretionary authority over distributions under Section 4.2 of the trust document. Please confirm your distribution intentions for the upcoming fiscal year by December 1st. If you wish to modify distribution terms or add conditions, this must be documented before the fiscal deadline. I am available to meet at your convenience. Best regards, Margaret Caldwell, ESQ. $15,247,891.33. Vivian was the sole beneficiary of that wealth. But I was the sole trustee. I was the person who controlled when, how, and whether a single penny of that money ever reached her hands. Grandma Eleanor had made that choice deliberately. She had confided in me during one of our last conversations. "Vivian isn't bad, Thora. She has just never had to learn the value of anything. I want you to teach her. It's the only way she will understand." I had kept this massive secret for 2 years. I had told no one. Not my parents, not Vivian, not anyone. Partly because I didn't want my family's relationship with me to revolve entirely around money. Partly because I wasn't ready to wield that kind of power. But now, sitting in my dark apartment, freshly exiled from Thanksgiving dinner strictly because my teaching salary might embarrass my sister in front of her wealthy boyfriend, I began to reconsider. This wasn't about revenge. That wasn't what Grandma Eleanor intended, and it wasn't what I wanted. This was about boundaries, accountability, the absolute right to exist in my own family without apologizing for who I had become. I closed the laptop and looked out the window at the distant city lights. I had held this secret for 2 years, and I was beginning to wonder if it was finally time to let it breathe. Thanksgiving Day arrived, overcast and bitterly cold, the specific variety of November afternoon that makes you want to pull the curtains and forget the outside world exists. I woke up at 7 out of pure habit. Even on holidays, my teacher's internal clock stubbornly refused to sleep past dawn. I brewed coffee in my small kitchen, watched the steam rise, and tried not to think about the family gathering happening 15 miles away without me. By noon, I had graded 32 essays. By 3, I had reorganized my entire bookshelf by historical periods. By 5, I had accepted that absolutely no amount of productivity could fill the hollow space sitting in my chest. I made myself dinner: a microwavable turkey breast, instant mashed potatoes, and canned cranberry sauce. It was the saddest Thanksgiving meal I had ever assembled, and I ate it standing at the counter because sitting at my small table felt too formal for a party of one. At 8:47 p.m., my phone lit up. A text from Vivian with a photo attached. "Thanks for understanding, sis. Derek loved the dinner." He said, "Our family is so put together, LOL." The image showed my entire family clustered around my parents' mahogany dining table, the exact piece Grandma Eleanor had gifted them 30 years ago. Patricia was beaming at the head of the table. Harold was looking slightly uncomfortable, but smiling. And Vivian was glowing right beside a dark-haired man draped in an expensive sweater. Derek Hartwell, I presumed. For place settings. No empty chair where I should have been. So put together. I set down my phone. Then I picked it up again and studied the photo more closely. My mother was wearing the genuine pearl earrings I had purchased for her 60th birthday, the ones she had casually dismissed as simple but thoughtful. Vivian was wrapped in a cashmere shawl that cost more than my monthly rent. And sitting right there in the background, just visible on the sideboard, was my grandmother's antique silver tea service. The one she had promised to me before she died, strictly because I was the only grandchild who ever helped her polish it. My mother had kept it. Of course she had. At 9:15 p.m., another text arrived, this time from my father. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry. Your mother said this was best for everyone. I love you." I typed 3 different responses and deleted every single one. What was there to say? He was sorry. He always was. But sorry didn't bring back a seat at the table. I dialed Rachel Torres instead. Rachel taught AP English at my high school. We had started the same year, survived countless horrific faculty meetings together, and developed the kind of unbreakable friendship forged through shared frustration and cafeteria coffee. She had listened to 10 years of Mitchell family stories, and she was the only person outside my bloodline who knew about the trust. "Please tell me you are not alone right now," she demanded. "I'm alone, Rachel." Her voice carried equal parts affection and exasperation. "I explicitly told you to come to my sister's place. Maria made enough food for an army." "I know. I needed to process." "Process what? Your family being terrible?" "That ship sailed years ago." A pause. "What happened?" I detailed the text message, the gloating photo, and the smiling faces perfectly aligned around a table that had no room for me. Rachel was quiet for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful. "Thora, when are you going to stop letting them treat you like this?" "I don't let them." "You absolutely do." Her delivery wasn't harsh, just devastatingly true. "You pay for their parties. You show up when they call. You apologize for existing. And they keep taking because you keep giving. What am I supposed to do? You possess options." I knew exactly what she meant. I have never wanted to use it as leverage. I know, but there is a massive difference between leverage and basic accountability. Rachel's voice softened. "Your grandmother didn't make you trustee by accident. She saw something in you. Maybe it's high time you saw it too." After we hung up, I sat motionless with my laptop for a long time. Eventually, I opened the folder, reread Margaret Caldwell's email, and clicked on the attachment I had been actively avoiding for months. The official trust document was 47 pages long. I had read it once when Margaret initially sent it, but the archaic legal language had blurred together in a fog of grief and disbelief. Tonight, I forced myself to focus. Section 4.2, Paragraph 1. The trustee shall have sole and absolute discretion to determine the timing, amount, and conditions of any distributions to the beneficiary. Sole discretion. Absolute. I thought about Vivian's taunting text. Derek loved the dinner. He said, "Our family is so put together." I visualized the empty chair that didn't exist because they had never intended to invite me. I clearly heard my grandmother's raspy voice from exactly 2 months prior to her passing. "One day you'll understand why I chose you, Thora. One day you'll need this. And when that day comes, I want you to remember, you are not powerless. You never were." I slowly closed the laptop. I wasn't ready to execute any final decisions tonight. But for the very first time in 2 years, I was officially done pretending that this massive mechanism of power didn't exist. My grandmother had handed me a key. The only remaining question was whether I was finally willing to use it. When I woke up on the morning of Friday, November 29th, I possessed a definitive plan. It wasn't fueled by revenge. I had never wanted that, and Grandma Eleanor wouldn't have wanted it either. I sought absolute clarity. After surviving years of accepting whatever meager crumbs my family offered, I needed to fully comprehend the exact nature of the weapon I was holding. I dialed Margaret Caldwell's office at 9 a.m. "Ms. Mitchell," she answered, her voice carrying the measured professionalism of someone who had shepherded 100 families through wealth and grief. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you. The fiscal deadline is Monday." "I know. I'd like to meet today, if possible." A brief pause. "I can make that work. 2 o'clock. Her firm was situated in Back Bay, a beautifully converted brownstone featuring brass fixtures and aromatic leather chairs. Margaret Caldwell was 58, silver-haired, and possessed the kind of calm authority that made you feel everything would be handled properly, even when your entire world was falling apart. She had been my grandmother's attorney for 20 years. She handed me a cup of black coffee and spread the expansive trust documents across her desk. "Let's review the basics," she instructed. "Your grandmother established the Eleanor Mitchell Irrevocable Trust in March 2022, approximately 8 months before her death. The trust holds various assets, stocks, municipal bonds, and a rental property over in Cambridge, currently valued at just over $15 million. And Vivian is the sole beneficiary." "Correct. But you, as the appointed trustee, control all distributions." Margaret firmly tapped Section 4.2, which she had highlighted in yellow. "This grants you broader authority than most trustees ever receive." Eleanor was very specific. She wanted you to have complete discretion over timing, amounts, and conditions. She told me she wanted Vivian to learn the value of things. Margaret nodded slowly. "Your grandmother and I had many extensive conversations about her granddaughters. She loved Vivian, but she was deeply concerned. She felt Vivian had been continually enabled, given things too easily, praised too freely, and never required to develop resilience or authentic gratitude. She believed the money would teach her. But she thought you would teach her. The money was merely the mechanism." Margaret's sharp eyes met mine. Eleanor sat right there and told me, "Thora is the only person in that family with the spine to say no and the heart to say it kindly." Those were her exact words. I stared down at the sprawling paperwork. 47 pages of impenetrable legal language, and buried deep within them was my grandmother's unwavering faith in me. "What exactly are my options for the annual distribution?" I asked. "You have several." Margaret withdrew a supplementary sheet. "You can authorize a standard distribution. Vivian is currently eligible to receive up to $200,000 per year. Alternatively, you can completely defer the distribution to the following fiscal year. You can attach strict conditions, educational requirements, certified financial literacy courses, employment verification. Or you can modify the payout schedule entirely. And if Vivian contests any of these decisions, she can absolutely petition the court," Margaret replied smoothly. But Eleanor's language is entirely airtight. "Unless you act in bad faith or blatantly breach your fiduciary duty, Your discretion is virtually unchallengeable. Your grandmother spent a considerable fortune ensuring that fact. I thought back to the Thanksgiving text message. The flawless family portrait with zero space for me. The stolen antique tea service that should have been resting on my counter. I am not ready to finalize a decision today, I stated calmly. But I wanted to fully understand my options before Monday arrives. Of course. Margaret began stacking the files. There is one final thing. Your grandmother left you a personal financial bequest, totally separate from the trust. $50,000, completely unrestricted. I believe you have been drawing from it for charitable donations. The Beacon Hill Winter Charity Gala. I've quietly contributed for the past 2 years. Yes, I reviewed those ledgers. You are officially listed as a founding donor. She slid a thick, expensive-looking envelope across the desk toward me. This arrived at my office last week. It is your exclusive VIP invitation for this year's event. I broke the seal. Heavy, premium cardstock with raised, tactile lettering. Resting inside was a beautiful metallic badge with my identity etched in shimmering gold. Thora Mitchell, founding donor. The High Society Gala was scheduled for tomorrow evening, Saturday, November 30th. It was being hosted in the Grand Ballroom of the Harrington Plaza. It was a strict black-tie affair catering to 500 of Boston's most elite financial moguls and philanthropists. It was the exact same exclusive party that Vivian and Derek were utilizing to make their grand social debut as a power couple. I genuinely didn't realize the timing, I whispered. Margaret's facial muscles didn't move, but a distinct spark ignited in her eyes. Life possesses rather fascinating ways of creating perfect opportunities, Ms. Mitchell. I stared at the golden credential in my hands. For 2 consecutive years, I had attended this lavish affair entirely anonymously. I would slip in through the side doors, make my financial pledges, and vanish into the night before anyone could strike up a conversation. I hadn't wanted my parents or sister to discover it. I hadn't wanted this pure, private sector of my existence to be weaponized as family ammunition. But they genuinely believed I was a walking, talking embarrassment. They deemed me too blue-collar to sit at their turkey dinner, too low status to shake Derek Hartwell's hand. And tomorrow evening, I was going to stride directly into the very same ballroom they were attending, proudly displaying a credential that their money couldn't even begin to buy. Miss Caldwell, I said, my voice rock steady. I would like to pencil in a follow-up appointment for first thing Monday morning, right before the fiscal deadline expires. I am highly confident my intentions will be crystal clear by then. She offered a genuine smile, the first authentic one I had witnessed all afternoon. I strongly suspect they will be, Ms. Mitchell. I exited her brownstone and stepped out into the biting November wind, carefully securing the founding donor credential inside my leather purse. For the very first time in 10 years, I felt like a woman who possessed the absolute right to walk into a room without asking for permission. Quick pause here. If you have ever been treated like you are totally invisible by your own family, or if you've ever had to choose between your self-respect and basic belonging, type enough down in the comments below. And if you're dying to see what chaos unfolds at this high society gala, hit that like button and keep watching. Trust me, you do not want to miss the climax. Alright, back to the story. My apartment buzzer shrieked at exactly 4:23 p.m. on Friday afternoon. I wasn't expecting any guests. Rachel was visiting her sister for the weekend, and my social roster wasn't exactly overflowing. I leaned forward, peered through the peephole, and felt my stomach violently drop. Patricia Mitchell was standing in my hallway. She was flanked tightly by Vivian and my father. My mother's facial features were locked into a highly specific configuration of frantic urgency and blind entitlement that I recognized from every unreasonable demand she had ever made. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Thora, my mother barked, aggressively pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. We need to have a serious talk about your grandmother's trust. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. They knew. Somehow, the secret had been unearthed. How did you possibly? Derek's personal financial advisor, Vivian interjected, marching inside right behind our mother. He ran a comprehensive background check on our entire family. Standard procedure for an executive operating at his level. She delivered this information as if it perfectly justified everything, as if aggressively invading my privacy was simply what wealthy individuals did on a Friday. Imagine my sheer absolute surprise when he mentioned a $15 million estate with your name stamped on it. A trust one never even knew existed. Harold shuffled into the apartment last, gently closing the door behind him. He appeared visibly uncomfortable, which was his default setting whenever family warfare erupted. Naturally, he said absolutely nothing. He never did. "You're the trustee?" Vivian's pitch skyrocketed into a screech. "You? A public school teacher making barely 50 grand a year? 58. Whatever." She let out a sharp, mocking cackle that instantly transported me back to childhood. This has to be some sort of massive mistake. Grandma Eleanor would never have put you in charge of anything important. My mother immediately raised her hand, effectively silencing Vivian with a single gesture. Patricia Mitchell hadn't dedicated 30 years of her life to scaling Boston's social ladder without mastering the art of tactical diplomacy. "Thora, sweetheart." My mother's cadence instantly morphed. It became softer, heavily sugared, the exact frequency she tuned into whenever she required a cash injection. "I am certain this entire ordeal is incredibly confusing for you. Estate matters and probate law are incredibly complicated. But we're a family unit, and families handle these heavy burdens together." By handle it, I assume you mean you want to take over? "I simply mean we should ensure that Grandma's dying wishes are properly honored." She unzipped her purse and extracted a manila folder. "I have already instructed our attorney to draw up the necessary paperwork to legally transfer the trustee role directly to me. It truly is the most sensible arrangement. I possess decades of experience navigating complex finances and—" "No." The single syllable hovered in the cramped apartment air. It was uncomplicated, absolute. Patricia blinked rapidly. "I beg your pardon." I said no. "I will not sign that paperwork." "Thora, please be reasonable. Grandma Eleanor specifically chose me." I kept my vocal cords completely relaxed, tapping into the deep well of patience I utilized to manage rowdy teenagers. She retained lawyers and medical professionals who officially confirmed her mental competency, and she signed with 2 witnesses. This trust is legally binding and flawlessly executed. Vivian aggressively stepped into my personal space, her cheeks burning crimson. "You are completely clueless about money. You spend your days teaching teenagers about Christopher Columbus. You ride the city bus to work. And you currently work in corporate marketing exclusively because your new boyfriend hired you as a romantic favor," I shot back. I watched her entire body flinch. "I am very familiar with the rigorous interview process, Vivian. Or rather, the complete lack of one." "How dare you?" "That is enough." Patricia's diplomatic facade officially shattered. "Thora, you are behaving like a selfish child. This capital is designated for Vivian's future. For her wedding venue, for her long-term security. Do you truly want to stand in the way of your own sister's happiness?" "I am not standing in the way of a single thing. I am executing exactly what Grandma asked me to do." My mother's eyes narrowed into slits. "And what exactly is that?" "Making sure this money is utilized responsibly." The walls in my apartment complex were notoriously thin. I had zero doubt that Mrs. Patterson from Unit 4B had her ear practically glued to the drywall by this point. I was supplying her with more premium drama than her daily soap operas. Vivian clearly sensed the audience because her volume plummeted into a venomous whisper. "You are deliberately embarrassing us all over again. It is what you do. You embarrassed our family image at my engagement party by showing up in that pathetic clearance rack dress. You would have embarrassed us to no end at Thanksgiving if we had let you attend. And right now, you are embarrassing us by pretending you are capable of managing anything more complicated than a middle school lesson plan." I stood there and actively processed the decades of identical insults I had absorbed. The wardrobe attacks, the career dismissals, the constant, suffocating implication that my existence was a stubborn stain on their perfect lives. Then I remembered the phantom feeling of my grandmother's palm resting over mine. "You are not powerless. You never were. You all need to leave," I commanded. "Thora," my mother attempted to argue. "I will be attending the winter charity gala tomorrow evening." I genuinely had not premeditated the announcement, but the sentence flowed out of me with stunning clarity. If you desperately wish to debate the legalities of the trust, we can continue this conversation there. Vivian barked a laugh. You weren't invited to the gala. Actually, as a matter of fact, I was. I reached my hand inside my purse, which was still resting on the entryway console, and extracted the heavy credential. Brilliant gold lettering stamped across thick cream cardstock. Founding donor. I have quietly contributed $50,000 over the course of the last 2 years, I explained. The foundation sends me a VIP all-access invitation every single November. For the very first time in my 32 years on Earth, I witnessed my mother's arrogant composure completely disintegrate. Her jaw physically dropped open. She closed it. She opened it again. That is not mathematically possible. The organization maintains meticulous financial records. You are more than welcome to verify them. Vivian violently snatched the credential from my fingers, glaring at the golden letters as though they might combust. Where on earth did you get $50,000? Grandma Eleanor. She left me a highly private, personal bequest, totally separate from the trust. I calmly plucked the badge back out of Vivian's frozen grip and tucked it away safely. She firmly believed in the philanthropic causes they support. I simply chose to honor her memory. The silence that engulfed my living room was deafening. I had spent my entire lifespan playing the role of the invisible daughter, the embarrassing career choice, the guest not worth a dinner plate. And in a span of 30 seconds, I had violently appended every single narrative they had ever constructed about me. Patricia was the first to patch her broken mask back together. Her voice emerged strained, but rigidly controlled. Very well. We will discuss this tomorrow then. At the gala. Yes, we will. She pivoted toward the exit, pausing with her hand resting on the doorframe. Thora, I urge you to think very carefully about what you are doing. Family is everything. I am well aware, I replied, pulling the door wide open for them. Which is precisely why I wasted an entire decade desperately trying to be part of one. They filed out into the corridor. Patricia led the retreat. Vivian shot me a glare composed of pure venom, and Harold trailed behind with something totally unreadable in his eyes. As my father crossed the threshold, he hesitated. Thora. Not now, Dad. He gave a single nod and followed his wife and daughter. I firmly locked the deadbolt and listened to the clicking of their heels fade into the distance. My hands were vibrating with adrenaline, but it wasn't fear. Tomorrow night, I was going to waltz into that grand ballroom. I was going to stand in the exact same room as my relatives at an event they believed they owned. And for the very first time in our shared history, they were going to be forced to look at me and see the truth. Not the disappointing failure they had invented, but the formidable woman my grandmother had always believed in. The Beacon Hill Winter Charity Gala completely consumed the grand ballroom of the Harrington Plaza, a cavernous architectural space specifically designed to make regular citizens feel microscopic and the wealthy feel magnificent. Cascading crystal chandeliers threw brilliant, warm light across a sea of 500 attendees draped in bespoke tuxedos and designer gowns. The absolute minimum donation for a standard ticket was $2,000. The ambient conversation buzzed with discussions regarding stock portfolios, massive philanthropy, and commercial real estate. I pulled up to the venue at 7:15 p.m. on Saturday, November 30th. I was wearing an understated, unbranded black evening dress I had scored off a clearance rack for $200. However, the golden badge securely pinned to my chest, declaring Thora Mitchell, founding donor, outshone every piece of diamond jewelry in the building. The VIP access portal was situated completely separate from the general admission doors. A uniformed staff member scanned my credentials, beamed with authentic warmth, and immediately directed me toward the exclusive reception lounge near the main stage. Ms. Mitchell, I cannot thank you enough for your continued support, the staff member gushed. The executive board explicitly asked me to convey their deepest gratitude. It is entirely my pleasure, I replied. My grandmother believed fiercely in your educational mission. I accepted a crystal flute of champagne and began navigating the dense crowd, swapping polite banter with various foundation executives who instantly recognized my name from the top-tier donor reports. For 2 years, I had treated these events like covert operations, sneaking in late, fulfilling my pledges and vanishing before anyone could ask questions. Tonight, the rules had changed. Tonight, I was officially done hiding. I spotted my family across the expansive ballroom at exactly 7:32 p.m. Patricia was wrapped in a striking emerald green dress. Harold looked visibly suffocated inside his rental tuxedo. And Vivian looked absolutely breathtaking in a shimmering silver gown that unquestionably cost more than my monthly salary. Standing proudly at her side was Derek Hartwell. He was tall, dark-haired, and exuded the effortless, relaxed confidence of a man who had never once panicked over a late bill. They hadn't spotted me yet. They were busy working the crowd. Vivian had her manicured hand resting lightly on Derek's arm, flawlessly executing the synchronized social choreography of highly ambitious people at elite events. I anchored myself near the stage perimeter, deeply engaged in a conversation with a senior board member regarding upcoming public school grant initiatives. The entire scenario felt utterly surreal. Here I was, casually discussing the intricacies of educational funding, simultaneously watching my own family perform a masterclass in pretending I didn't exist. All within a room where my identity carried significantly more influence than any of them realized. At 7:48 p.m., Derek's eyes locked onto my credential. I witnessed the exact moment it happened. He was casually scanning the ballroom, mentally logging the major philanthropic players the way successful executives do, when his line of sight slammed into my chest. Specifically, it locked onto the bold, golden letters spelling out founding donor. He leaned in and murmured something to Vivian. She casually glanced in my direction, and I watched the blood violently drain from her face, leaving her a sickly shade of gray. But Derek was already in motion, striding purposefully across the floor and physically pulling Vivian along by her hand. He had been socially trained to immediately acknowledge massive donors. It was basic networking. And whatever invasive background sweep his team had conducted had blatantly failed to flag my massive charitable footprint. "Excuse me," he announced, extending a manicured hand as he reached me. "I am Derek Hartwell. I do not believe we have formally met, but I felt compelled to personally thank you for your massive support of this foundation. Your financial contributions have been extraordinary." Up close, he was classically handsome in a highly polished way. Great bone structure, immaculate grooming, coated in the frictionless veneer of generational wealth. Yet, his gaze was remarkably intelligent, and when he pumped my hand, his grip felt incredibly genuine. "Thank you so much," I replied. "I'm Thora Mitchell." The surname registered. I watched the gears grind in his brain. There was a microscopic widening of his pupils, a lightning-fast dart of his eyes toward Vivian, and a rapid, silent recalculation. "Mitchell," he repeated slowly. "As in, Vivian's older sister?" "Yes." He instantly spun to face Vivian. Her complexion had transitioned from pale to chalk white. "You explicitly told me just moments ago that you did not know who the woman wearing the founding donor badge was." I didn't," Vivian stammered, her vocal cords betraying her panic. "I honestly didn't recognize her at first. The chandelier lighting in here is..." "The lighting?" Derek's tone plummeted into a glacial freeze. "Your own flesh and blood sister has funneled over $100,000 into an organization I support, and you didn't recognize her." The surrounding high society guests were beginning to notice. The volume of our conversation wasn't screamingly loud, but the aggressive physical posture of our cluster spoke volumes. Tension, silent conflict, and the intoxicating spectacle of wealthy people behaving erratically. Patricia materialized at Vivian's right elbow like an apparition, her internal social radar having successfully detected the impending crisis. "Derek, darling, what a simply wonderful event this is turning out to be. Have you had a chance to see the silent auction items yet?" "Mrs. Mitchell." Derek's delivery remained deceptively polite, but a massive fault line had fractured beneath his polished exterior. "I was just in the middle of thanking your eldest daughter for her breathtaking charitable contributions. I understand she has operated as a founding donor here for the past 2 years." Patricia's painted smile cemented into place. "My daughter? Thora." He gestured emphatically toward me. "She has apparently been contributing $50,000 annually. That is more than many of our VIP ticket holders combined." I had absolutely no idea. Patricia's voice trailed off into nothingness. Her legendary composure was officially evaporating for the second time in 48 hours. You didn't realize that your own daughter was a major philanthropist? Derek raised a single eyebrow. How interesting. He pivoted back to face me. Ms. Mitchell, Thora, please accept my deepest apologies. I was explicitly told that the entirety of the Mitchell family would be attending tonight, but your name was conveniently never mentioned. I am not often mentioned, I stated. The words escaped my lips before I could soften them, but they were the unvarnished truth, and I was entirely exhausted from softening the truth. Derek. Vivian's manicured nails dug aggressively into his suit arm. This is deeply personal family business. It is incredibly complicated. What exactly is complicated about it? His voice turned lethal. Your sister is standing right here with credentials proving she has taken this foundation's mission incredibly seriously for years. And barely 15 minutes ago, you looked me in the eyes and told me you had never seen her before. Derek, I am begging you. What else haven't you told me? A fresh voice sliced through the tension. It was perfectly measured, brimming with authority, and executed with impeccable comedic timing. Thora, my dear. I certainly did not expect our paths to cross here tonight. Margaret Caldwell glided into our circle. She was wrapped in a stunning navy blue gown, her silver hair styled into an elegant French twist. She offered Derek a subtle nod, the casual acknowledgement of professional circles overlapping at high society fundraisers. Mr. Hartwell, it is always a pleasure. She then turned her focus entirely to me. I sincerely hope we are still confirmed for our Monday morning appointment. We have quite a massive pile of documents to discuss regarding your annual review. Derek's posture instantly stiffened. Review? Margaret offered a placid, harmless smile. Ms. Mitchell happens to be one of my firm's most valued clients. She manages an incredibly substantial legal trust with remarkable diligence. She slowly rotated her gaze to lock onto Patricia. Your late mother made a truly excellent choice, Mrs. Mitchell. The Eleanor Mitchell Irrevocable Trust is resting in incredibly capable hands. The ambient temperature in our immediate radius seemed to plunge by several degrees. Thora is the one managing the trust? Derek's eyes ping-ponged violently between me and Vivian. The exact same trust you specifically told me was locked up in probate and handled by the estate lawyers? Vivian looked like she was about to pass out on her silver gown. I didn't. I honestly thought. You thought what, precisely? I stood perfectly still and watched my little sister desperately search for words, for excuses, for a smokescreen, anything to manipulate the optics so she wouldn't look like a pathological liar or a complete fool. She came up entirely empty. I think I interjected quietly that the two of you require some privacy to sort this out. If you will all excuse me. I pivoted on my heels to walk toward the catering tables, but Derek's sharp voice arrested my momentum. Ms. Mitchell. Thora. I glanced over my shoulder. The artificial, charming mask he wore for the public had been entirely stripped away, exposing genuine regret underneath. I am deeply sorry for whatever foolish role I have played in tonight's utter confusion. And I am sorry for whatever toxic dynamic has been operating within your family. You truly didn't know? I asked. No, he replied grimly. But I am getting a very clear picture of it now. He shot Vivian a look that was absolutely devastating. I recognized it instantly. It was the crushing, hollow disappointment a person experiences the exact second they realize the human being sleeping next to them is a complete fraud. I abandoned them right there in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by 500 high society witnesses, and strolled casually toward the open bar. My hands were rock steady. My heartbeat was a calm drum. For the very first instance in my existence, I had stood my ground in a massive room filled with the exact demographic my relatives worshipped, and they had been violently forced to witness my actual reality. The tables hadn't just turned. The entire playing field had been flipped entirely. All right, I know exactly what you are screaming at your screens right now. Thora, that was incredibly satisfying. Or maybe Vivian got exactly what she deserved. Jump down to the comments and let me know whose side you are currently on. And if you have ever executed a flawless table-turning moment in your own life, I desperately want to read your story. Smash the like button if you felt the anxiety radiating off that ballroom confrontation. The ending is going to shock you. Let's finish this. I eventually tracked down Margaret Caldwell hovering near the silent auction displays. She was meticulously scrutinizing a framed watercolor painting of the Boston skyline with intense professional focus. Well, she murmured without pulling her eyes away from the canvas. That escalated significantly more dramatically than I had anticipated. I swear I didn't plan it, I replied. Of course you didn't. The best confrontations rarely are pre-planned. She finally turned to look at me. I currently have multiple rough drafts of distribution contracts sitting in my office. Following the fireworks we just witnessed, do you possess a clearer sense of your intentions? I pictured my grandmother's raspy voice. I visualized that digital photograph from Thanksgiving featuring the missing chair. I saw the pure terror in Vivian's face when Derek cracked her web of deceit. I want to legally defer all financial distributions for a period of 12 full months. Margaret nodded slowly, entirely unsurprised. And upon what legal grounds? Beneficiary readiness. Section 4.2 explicitly permits me to evaluate financial maturity as a valid variable when dictating timelines. And the condition? I am mandating that Vivian must successfully graduate from a highly certified personal financial management curriculum before a single dime is released to her. That falls perfectly within your legal authority. She magically produced a sleek leather notepad from her evening clutch. Even while sipping champagne at a gala, Margaret was eternally prepared. What else? I want to formally brief Derek Hartwell on the exact mechanics and reality of the trust. Not to maliciously sabotage their relationship, but simply because the man deserves total factual transparency before legally binding his life to hers. Also an incredibly rational move. Transparency rarely inflicts damage on honest individuals. She jotted down a shorthand note. And the trusteeship? I am not surrendering my title to Patricia or anyone else. I will continue serving exactly as my grandmother intended. Margaret snapped the notepad shut. I will ensure the finalized paperwork is ready on my desk by Monday morning. The 12-month deferral will go into active effect the literal second my ink hits the paper. Thank you. She held my gaze for a prolonged moment. Eleanor would be incredibly proud of you tonight, Thora. Not because you are punishing your sister. You aren't. But because you are finally unearthing the courage to wield the authority she handed you. That is exactly what she wanted. Before I could formulate a response, the aggressive clicking of heels approached. It was Vivian. She was flying solo now, and the breathtaking aura of her silver dress was completely diminished by the rabid, unhinged fury radiating from her eyes. I sincerely hope you are completely satisfied, she hissed, her volume suppressed, but dripping with venom. Derek is suddenly demanding space to reconsider everything. The engagement ring, the wedding venue, our entire future. All because of you. No, I countered, keeping my tone dead flat. This is happening strictly because of decisions you actively made. Because of the lies you spun. I merely happened to be standing in the room when the truth finally became visible. You completely ruined my life. I corrected a factual misunderstanding. If the foundation of your entire life was constructed on top of that misunderstanding, that is absolutely not my responsibility. You. She desperately struggled for words, her polished facade totally crumbling. You have literally always been deeply jealous of me. Always. Simply because I am highly successful and you are just a pathetic teacher. Vivian. I took a single, deliberate step closer, dropping my pitch so low that only she could hear. I am not executing this to hurt you. Grandma Eleanor truly loved you. She deeply desired for you to have this wealth. But she simultaneously wanted you to evolve into someone who actually deserved it. I deserve to hold it right now. Then step up and prove it. Take the financial management curriculum I am mandating. Demonstrate that you possess the capacity to handle adult responsibility. In exactly 12 months, we can sit down and revisit the distribution timeline. Her facial features twisted into an ugly snarl. You are forcing stipulations on me? You are legitimately making me jump through circus hoops just to access my own inheritance. I am doing exactly what our grandmother asked me to do. I refuse to break eye contact. You have never been forced to earn a single luxury in your entire life, Vivian. I think the moment has arrived for you to finally learn how. I hate you. The sentence bled out of her, sounding raw and startlingly childlike. I legitimately hate you. I fully acknowledged that her declaration should have hurt more than it did, but it honestly didn't. My job description doesn't require you to love me. My job description is strictly to honor Grandma's wishes, and I am going to execute that job whether you hate me or not. Vivian stared at me for 5 agonizing seconds, then violently spun around and walked away without another syllable. Predictably, my mother tracked me down next. Thora. Patricia's diplomatic mask was desperately strapped back onto her face, but massive structural cracks were highly visible around the edges. You have gone way too far tonight. Have I really? Publicly humiliating your sister? Actively interfering with her romantic relationship? This is absolutely not what family does. No, I tilted my chin upward. What about picking up the phone and banning your own daughter from Thanksgiving dinner strictly because her honest job might embarrass the family? Is that exactly what family does? That scenario was entirely different. Explain to me exactly how. For the first time in my recorded memory, Patricia had no ready ammunition. Mom, I said quietly, dropping my combative tone. I did not buy a ticket tonight to launch a war. I showed up because I was formally invited. I was publicly recognized because I have spent 2 years financially backing this foundation, quietly honoring Grandma Eleanor's values, while you aggressively dismissed me as an embarrassment. Every single chaotic event that unfolded in this ballroom tonight occurred strictly because you and Vivian made the active choice to hide truths and peddle lies. I took a deep breath. I am going to keep serving as the trustee. I am going to force Vivian to meet strict conditions before she touches those funds. And I am officially done pretending that being treated as an invisible punching bag is acceptable. What exactly is it you want from us? The directness of the inquiry caught me slightly off guard. Not because it was an absurd question, but because for the first time in my life, she sounded genuinely desperate for an answer. Respect, I replied. And not because of $15 million or VIP status, but simply because I am your daughter. I have wasted 32 years of my life desperately attempting to earn a valid seat at your table, and my shift is officially over. Moving forward, I either belong in this family exactly as I exist, or I do not belong at all. My father suddenly drifted into the periphery of our standoff, awkwardly hovering the way he had for my entire life. Harold, Patricia barked, seeking backup. Please tell your daughter that she is acting irrationally. Both Patricia and I swiveled our heads to stare at the man. She is absolutely correct, Harold stated. His vocal cords possessed a rich, sturdy timbre I hadn't heard him utilize in decades. We have treated Thora terribly. Eleanor recognized it. I silently recognized it. And I was too much of a coward to ever intervene. He looked right past my mother and locked eyes with me. I am incredibly proud of the woman you are, sweetheart. I should have vocalized that a long time ago. I couldn't fully trust my throat not to close up, so I simply offered him a tight nod. My mother whipped her head back and forth between the two of us, her brain rapidly calculating, frantically reassessing the terrain. I could physically see the realization wash over her. The tectonic plates of our family dynamic, the same plates she had ruthlessly controlled for over 30 years, had permanently shifted. She no longer held the high ground. We need to leave the premises, she finally muttered, tightly gripping Harold's arm. This is not the appropriate place. No, I softly agreed. It really isn't. I exited the gala at precisely 10:47 p.m. I stepped out into the biting November night, my gold badge still proudly anchored to my dress. The hotel doorman hailed a yellow cab for me, addressing me as MS Mitchell with genuine warmth. I didn't feel like a conquering hero. I didn't feel a toxic sense of vindication. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully free. The collateral damage manifested within 48 hours. First thing Sunday morning, Derek Hartwell formally announced to Vivian that he required a significant amount of space to think. By the time Monday afternoon rolled around, their impending engagement was placed on an indefinite hold. It wasn't officially canceled, but it was suspended in a brutal limbo that communicated volumes. The gossip detonated through their elite social circles with the terrifying efficiency that only the wealthy can achieve. The undisputed golden couple of Hartwell Capital had struck massive turbulence. Vivian's cushy marketing position at his private equity firm instantly became an HR nightmare by Tuesday. Derek was far too polished to formally fire her, but she was heavily encouraged by senior management to begin exploring outside opportunities that might better align with her long-term career goals. Translation: her daily presence in the office was painfully awkward, and everybody knew it. She boxed up her desk on the 3rd of December. My mother's smartphone essentially melted from the volume of incoming calls. The Hendersons, the Castellanos, the Morrison Whites from her charity board all continually rang her up, feigning deep concern and offering hollow sympathies. It was simply high society code for trying to extract juicy details about the massive Thanksgiving scandal that had dominated the Winter Gala's rumor mill. The narrative is absolutely everywhere, Rachel reported to me over coffee on Wednesday morning. I literally caught 3 differing variations of the drama while I was sitting at the dentist's office yesterday. Something involving a cruel sister getting banned from turkey dinner, only to crash a millionaire's ball as a secret major donor. The specifics are getting wildly exaggerated, but the punchline remains completely identical. And what is the punchline? I asked. That the supposedly embarrassing, disappointing daughter secretly turned out to be vastly more impressive than anyone knew. Rachel flashed a brilliant smile. Society absolutely loves an underdog narrative, Thora. Especially an underdog who brings the receipts. The strictly legal aftermath was finalized on Monday morning, the 2nd of December, sitting inside Margaret Caldwell's office. I pressed my pen to the deferral documents at exactly 9:15 a.m. The legal phrasing was surgical. All financial distributions originating from the Eleanor Mitchell Irrevocable Trust and designated for the beneficiary, Vivian Mitchell, were explicitly suspended for a 12-month duration, entirely pending her successful completion of a certified personal financial management boot camp at an accredited educational institution. The mandate was not designed to be punitive. It was the exact baseline prerequisite that veteran trustees universally applied to young beneficiaries who hadn't demonstrated baseline financial readiness. For whatever it might be worth to your conscience, Margaret noted as she aggressively notarized the final page, your late grandmother would have executed this exact maneuver. She possessed zero interest in dealing punishments. Her sole objective was cultivating growth. I genuinely hope Vivian eventually sees it that way. Someday, she just might, I replied. Time has a funny way of altering perspectives. Margaret slid the finalized documents into a secure folder. There is one final item. Derek Hartwell's executive assistant contacted my desk yesterday. Mr. Hartwell would love to sit down with you privately. There is absolutely zero pressure. You are under zero legal obligation to entertain him. However, he conveyed a very sincere interest in comprehending the actual reality of your family's dynamic. I thought about it. I will consider it. The digital letter from my father arrived that same afternoon. It spanned 3 massive pages. It was definitively the highest word count Harold Mitchell had directed toward another human being in years, probably ever. He comprehensively apologized for 32 years of absolute silence. He directly validated that my mother's psychological warfare had been entirely unfair and admitted that his failure to intervene made him totally complicit. He didn't formulate a single pathetic excuse. He didn't even beg for my forgiveness. He simply stated that he desperately wanted to attempt to do better, provided I was willing to let him try. I read the text 3 separate times. Then I saved it in a digital folder titled Family. Vivian's reaction arrived via text message on the 5th of December. Fine. I will enroll in your stupid class. But do not expect me to send you a thank you card for this. I typed back, I am not expecting your thanks. I am strictly expecting results. Good luck with the program. She left me on read, but Margaret's office confirmed the official enrollment documentation 2 days later. Introduction to Personal Financial Management. The curriculum commenced on January 15th at a reputable local community college. It was a brutal 12-week timeline. The initial step toward proving she possessed the capacity to safely handle the massive inheritance our grandmother had saved for her. A notorious Boston high society blog published an explosive piece on December 8th. It was authored anonymously, but the details were glaringly sourced from gala attendees. The headline read, "The Thanksgiving Scandal That Rocked the Winter Gala." It documented a sequence of events that was mostly accurate, sketching my family in highly unflattering shades, while framing me as a quiet philanthropist who emerged from the shadows with impeccable timing. I inherently disliked being thrust into the public eye, but I couldn't deny the deep, visceral satisfaction of watching my actual truth acknowledged in bold print. On December 10th, an email arrived from the charity's executive board. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, Indiana, deep recognition of your extraordinary commitment to our mission, we would be profoundly honored to offer you a permanent invitation to join our advisory council. Your unique perspective as a frontline educator, combined with your fierce dedication to charitable giving, would be invaluable to our strategic planning efforts. We sincerely hope you will consider this opportunity. Warmest regards, the Beacon Hill Foundation Board." I read that invitation while sitting at the tiny kitchen table inside the exact apartment my relatives had mocked as a tragic embarrassment. I had just spent a grueling day teaching high schoolers about the progressive era and the massive, century-long arc of social change. I couldn't help but smile, thinking that perhaps, for the very first time in my existence, that heavy arc was finally bending in my direction. December 21st, exactly 4 days prior to Christmas morning, and exactly 3 weeks since the implosion at the gala. My modest apartment was suffocatingly warm and smelled absolutely incredible: roasted rosemary poultry, charred winter vegetables, and a massive pie cooling on the counter that Rachel had smuggled in. Despite her constant claims that she didn't bake, she had helped me aggressively push my tiny dining table against the wall to wedge in enough space for 6 mismatched chairs. The guest list included Rachel, 2 other history teachers from my hallway, Maria from Rachel's family, and my father. Just my father. Patricia had dialed my number twice that week, asking to be included. I shot her down both times. "Not yet, Mom. I require more time." When she asked exactly how much time, I told her I would let her know. Shockingly, she hadn't argued back. That single lack of argument communicated exactly how violently the power structure of the family had shifted over the past 3 weeks. Harold arrived at 5:30 p.m. He was clutching a bottle of expensive wine and wearing an expression of nervous optimism. He had never once visited my apartment before. In an entire decade, 0 members of my family had bothered to visit. "It is very nice," he murmured, visually absorbing the towering bookshelves, the framed photographs, and the quirky touches that made the space undeniably mine. "It is totally you." "Thanks, Dad." The dinner service was imperfect and absolutely wonderful. Rachel recounted horrifying tales from our disastrous first year of teaching. Maria aggressively dominated a heated debate regarding optimal pie crust technique. My teaching colleagues loudly complained about the tyranny of standardized testing. My father mostly sat back and listened, but whenever he did chime in, his insights were thoughtful and incredibly kind. At one point during the meal, he caught my eye across the table and silently mouthed the words, "Thank you." I gave him a nod. We were both actively learning how this totally new dynamic could look. A relationship anchored in absolute honesty, rather than a fragile peace maintained by avoidance. Vivian's text arrived at exactly 7:45 p.m. "Merry Christmas, Thora. I am honestly trying." I slid my cell phone across the tablecloth so my father could read the screen. He reviewed the sentence twice before sliding the device back to me. "She genuinely means it," he whispered. "The coursework is significantly harder than she anticipated, but she is putting in the actual work." "Good. She actually asked me yesterday if you would ever be capable of forgiving her." I let that question hang in the air for a moment. Forgiveness is not the issue here. Basic trust is. And trust requires a massive amount of time. Harold nodded slowly. "That is completely fair." I picked up the phone and typed my response to Vivian. "I can see that. Merry Christmas." 3 basic words. It wasn't full absolution. It wasn't a warm, fuzzy embrace. But it was an honest acknowledgement. A heavy door left cracked slightly open. Hours later, after everyone had hugged goodbye and left, with Rachel stubbornly lingering behind to scrub dishes despite my intense protests, I sat completely alone in the absolute quiet of my apartment, staring blankly at the cheap string of holiday lights I had taped across my window pane. The preceding month had violently educated me on concepts I should have mastered years ago. I finally understood that setting firm boundaries is not a form of punishment, it is an act of absolute protection. I learned that rejecting unfair treatment is never an act of selfishness, it is a basic necessity. I learned that you can deeply love your relatives while simultaneously refusing to absorb their harm. My grandmother had possessed this wisdom all along. She had quietly armed me with the exact tools I needed to protect my dignity, fully aware that I would require years to finally find the sheer courage to wield them. "You are not powerless," she had told me. "You never were." I hadn't believed her back then, but I believed her now. The official invitation from the charity's executive board was resting on my coffee table. I had already decided to formally accept the seat. Not because I craved the high society status or the VIP recognition, but simply because it felt incredibly right. It was a way to actively continue Grandma Eleanor's fierce legacy of thoughtful giving, a method to anchor myself to something far larger than my family's inherited dysfunction. And as for teaching, I was absolutely going to keep teaching. Not because I lacked other avenues, but because the work actually mattered. Because every single time a brilliant kid like Marcus Thompson turned in a staggering essay, or an observant kid like Jasmine Reyes asked a sharp question, I was violently reminded exactly why I had dedicated my life to this path in the first place. My blue-collar paycheck had never been the actual problem. The real problem was the toxic people who blindly measured human worth in dollar signs instead of worldly impact. I grabbed my phone one last time and fired off a quick email to Derek Hartwell's executive assistant. "I am willing to meet for coffee at a neutral location. Let me know what schedule works." The man genuinely deserved to comprehend the unvarnished reality of the family he was debating marrying into, or the family he was debating sprinting away from. Whatever final verdict he reached, it was going to be built on a foundation of absolute truth. The final action I took before heading to sleep was pulling up that digital photo from Thanksgiving. The exact image Vivian had texted me, displaying 4 beaming faces and 0 empty chairs. I didn't hit the delete button. I really didn't need to. That digital file no longer represented my present story. It was simply a historical artifact proving the existence of a toxic version of my family that no longer survived, all because I finally decided to stop pretending that being treated like an invisible punching bag was an acceptable way to live. If you were to ask me today whether I harbored any deep regrets, the answer would be incredibly simple. No, none whatsoever. My only genuine regret is that I didn't push back a decade sooner. And that brings us to the end of my story. If you are currently sitting there debating whether to draw a firm line with the toxic people you love, or if you are gearing up to do it, please know that you are absolutely not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts. I read every single one. If you crave more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new drop. Be sure to check out the description box for links to similar videos on the channel. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Remember to protect your peace and take care of yourself. You absolutely deserve it.